I think that what we're seeing is the classical divide between, the liberal elites of our country who are impressed by having an Oxford or a Harvard education, and the rest of the country that's trying to pay the bills.
Breaking news, everybody. The Liberal government is giving you a new rebate. You'll never guess what it's for, but there is a reason why the Liberals keep doing this and repeating it so incessantly. In fact, it's something that history has written about for centuries and warned about for decades, for generations. The latest floor crosser, Marilyn Gladu, well, it looks like she may have actually dug her own hole for her political coffin to go into, because it turns out that this might be illegal. The Liberal NPCs have obviously received their spring update in AI for talking points, and it's just too funny. We have to talk about it because it's hilarious. I'm Jasmine Lane. Like, share, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below. And Pierre Poilievre gave a massive speech yesterday. However, instead of responding to it, the media is trying to figure out how to properly label him so that they can discourage as many people away from watching it. All that and so much more coming up today. But first, I wanted to share this really cute, happy piece of news coming out of Canada before we go into banging our head into a wall momentarily.
Missy is a 5-year-old husky who has been coming to Spot's place for nearly her entire life. On a day when she was scheduled to be elsewhere, Missy surprised everyone at the dog daycare by making her way over unsupervised.
I looked up on our security cameras that are in front of my desk, and I saw this dog running around in the parking lot. I'm like, oh my God, there's a dog out there. It's Missy. So we let Missy in. Yeah. Biggest smile on her face. She was so proud of herself, so happy to be here.
There is so much that we can take away from this story, which will make sense to you soon here. But Missy, basically her owner, would frequently bike to doggy daycare 5 days a week, rain, snow, sunshine, you name it. And so Missy was very used to the route to get there, and she had escaped underneath a fence in the yard when she went out to go to the bathroom, then decided to just walk like she normally does, 10 to 15 minutes to doggy daycare, which is unbelievably adorable. Thank goodness that she did not get hurt, though, because there were several high traffic roads she had to cross to make it there. But I do think that this story is a perfect example of something that we constantly underestimate, which is how much repetition builds learned behavior and builds intelligence in some cases. Because Missy, in this case, she didn't get lucky. She learned the route through consistency. And then over time, that became an instinct for her. And so she went somewhere where she felt safe, familiar, and rewarded. And we laugh at this story because it's wholesome and it's very cute. It's also like any dog owner's worst nightmare because so much could have gone wrong. But it does mirror human behavior so perfectly. People do not randomly keep ending up where they feel safe. Even if safe isn't good, it's just comfortable. They train themselves into it. And that could be through routines, your environment as a child that you learn into adulthood, and you carry that with you, your beliefs, and even echo chambers. We follow the paths that we most often repeat. And so in this case, Missy didn't get lost. She went somewhere where she knew she would be taken care of. And that's the part that people should think about, because it doesn't matter if you're a dog or a human. You don't always drift toward what's true. You drift toward what is most familiar to you.
Will provide direct relief to more than 12 million Canadians, helping to offset the cost of groceries for working families.
Now, this is to replace the government's old GST or HST credit that they would send out. It is now called Canada's Groceries and Essentials Benefit. And you do need to file your taxes in order to be eligible for this return, refund, whatever the hell you want to call it.
I have the pleasure to announce that this payment will go out to Canadians on June 5th of this year. This top-up is equivalent to 50% of the annual GST-HST credit for the current year, 2025-2026, providing immediate direct help to families when it's needed the most. This is meaningful, targeted support to help Canadians afford day-to-day essentials.
Depending on how big your family is, whether or not you are married or common law or single, the payments will differ in amounts. I've put them up on screen so you can take a look here. However, one thing that MP Wayne Long said is, as a society, we should be judged by how we protect our most vulnerable, which sounds incredibly compassionate, except it always consistently, as per usual, misses the biggest question of all, which is, why exactly do Canadians need emergency grocery checks in the first place? Because this isn't actually about helping people. This is about managing the symptoms of a problem the government helped to create. It's really irritating to me, I think, how modern policy tends to be shifting in this direction and people cheer it on, where instead of lowering costs, the government just increases government dependency through rebates, through subsidies. And over time, that really changes and damages the relationship between citizens and government, where we used to have people who were like, yeah, no, let me keep more of what I earn. You focus on the essential things that you need to focus on as government. And now it's people who sit around and say, I'll wait for the next check. I have so many friends from Argentina who have shared this with me, how it was so frustrating to them because they were people, many of which who had grown up pre the total socialist rule and who knew that this wasn't right. And then they had all of these other people who were really lazy, who didn't really want to do anything. They didn't care. They stopped caring, or they grew up inside of that system and it was normal. And so instead of wanting to do things, of aspiring and having big dreams and being able to achieve them, they just became people who were like, I don't care. Why would I try anything when I can just wait on that government check? That's so much easier than anything else. It's really hard to get out of this situation. Yeah, my life sucks, but at least I have my bare minimums. And you become incredibly complacent. You also have learned helplessness, which I would argue a good chunk of Canadians do indeed have. Some of them for very valid reasons, and others just due to laziness. I don't know how else to put that nicely, but it's lazy. The system is normalized. And the thing about that that's really tricky is that it's really hard to reverse.
Mr. Carney's been in power now a year. When will groceries be affordable?
Right.
When will the pipeline be under construction? When will that famous deal with the United States actually happen? By the way, I understand there haven't been negotiations in 5 months. Mm-hmm. What's happening there?
And I would argue that that is precisely why you have Mark Carney and the Liberal government always targeting that. They are targeting those most vulnerable people to get their votes. They're targeting the people who don't remember that it doesn't have to be like this. They're actively vilifying anybody who has an idea that will actually break that system wide open, which would be better for all of us as a whole. And of course, there should always be supports for our most vulnerable. The problem here, though, is that when you have a top-down approach with very limited oversight, things get very much taken advantage of. Not to mention, when you have all of these systems in place, you just keep growing and growing and growing these systems. How do you pay for them?
This is how it works. To pay the cost of a bad investment, the government raises taxes, further slowing economic growth, so it begins printing money. And as money outgrows the stuff it buys, prices rise, inflation grows. Mark Carney not only supports this agenda, he is its global symbol. It's the policy he pursued as a central banker and then as Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. And now that he is Prime Minister, he's doing it all over again. And none of this is to disparage Mr. Carney, who's a perfectly fine gentleman. It's just to point out, and with the greatest respect, that Mr. Carney has been wrong about every major economic issue of the last decade. When he was the head of the Bank of England, he printed money, leaving that country with the worst inflation in the G7 and a housing crisis that deprived an entire generation of youth of home ownership. He wrongly predicted that COVID would cause deflation, that prices would drop. And the result was that he advised governments to print copious amounts of money, giving us the worst inflation in 40 years. And all through 2020, while I was warning that inflation would result from this spending and printing, what did Mr. Carney say in a December 2020 interview? Well, after the realities of COVID were very well known, he said, "Do I worry about inflation? Look, in the horizon of a normal central banker, 2 or 3 years, the horizon for monetary policy, it is unlikely to materialize to a serious extent." End quote. 2 years later, on schedule, we had the worst inflation in 40 year. Under Mark Carney, Canada has the highest household debt in the G7, the most unaffordable housing in the G7, the lowest investment per worker in the G7, the worst food price inflation in the G7, the second lowest productivity in the G7, and the second highest unemployment in the G7. An outflow of $500 billion of investment has left our country under the Liberals for the United States. Twice as much investment has left Canada in the last 10 years than has returned, according to an RBC report released just 2 days ago. And twice as many Canadians are opening businesses in the United States as in Canada. Let that sink in. Twice as many Canadians are opening businesses in the United States than in Canada. And we got a solution to this problem at the Liberal convention. They want to put a $500,000 exit tax on anyone threatening to leave the country. Any country that feels it must punish people for fleeing is not a place of hope and optimism. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business wrote this week that after a year of Mark Carney, quote, more businesses have been closing than opening in Canada. It's time to admit it. We're in an entrepreneurial drought.
But according to Mark Carney, things have never been better. I mean, let's just take a listen to this from the House of Commons recently, and let's fact check and add some context to it.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Mr. Speaker, I feel like I'm in the presence of students. And on an exam, I don't think you would pass the exam with those answers. Mr. Speaker, as the IMF confirmed yesterday, Canada will have the second fastest growth in the G7 this year. As the IMF confirmed yesterday, we have the best fiscal position in the G7. Point final. As we have confirmed, we have the highest foreign direct investment per capita in the world.
Oh, the Liberal arrogance. You can cut through it with a knife.
Censorship is back, and it's happening everywhere. Platforms are controlling narratives and pushing the stuff that they want us to see. We need to fight back. Rumble is the only company that stood the test of time and deserves our support. On one side, they're challenging big tech censorship, but now on the other side, they've introduced something that gives us protection against big banks shutting us off. Banks can cancel our accounts and freeze our cards. That's why they launched Rumble Wallet, one that nobody can cancel. Not a bank, a government, a tech company. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money. You can buy and save digital assets like Bitcoin, Tether Gold, and the new USAT. Tether's US regulated stablecoin all in one place. Tether Gold is real gold on the blockchain with physical ownership of gold bars. USAT keeps your money steady against inflation. No banks needed. It's not only a wallet to buy and save, it also allows you to support your favorite creators by easily tipping them with the click of a button. Support my show and other creators by clicking the tip button on my Rumble channel, wallet.rumble.com. Download Rumble Wallet today, open an account, and step away from big banks for good. That's wallet.rumble.com, or search Rumble Wallet in the App Store. Those devilish details that are so conveniently omitted. Yes, it is true that Canada will have the fastest growing economy in the G7, according to the IMF. However, those devilish details, while that sounds incredibly strong, economists have noted that this growth is partially just due to a rebound from a weak 2025, where the economy only grew by 1.7%, half of the global average. Canada is in the best fiscal position in the G7. Well, that's actually pretty mixed on whether or not that's accurate. It depends on the metric used. If you're factoring in net debt to GDP ratio, sure, that remains the lowest in the G7. But if you want to factor in total debt, especially because our federal debt is projected to reach $2.9 trillion by 2030. As for the highest foreign direct investment per capita in the G7, the Liberals love repeating this one. What they failed to admit, though, is that much of that investment involved foreign firms buying existing Canadian companies rather than building new factories. So the long-term benefit to Canadians is pretty slim in that one, but it is a nice talking point. You know what, though? I am much less interested in what the IMF has to say from whatever documentation they were provided compared to what Canadian private sector banks have to say. I think that is the missing piece of the equation, because the GDP growth, as per the IMF, says maybe 1.5%. Banks in Canada, though, say 1.1 to maybe 1.3. In fact, a couple of other, including BMO banks, have said that our growth is likely going to be as low as 1%, pointing to the turbulent nature of the upcoming USMCA or CUSMA negotiations. As for our fiscal position, Desjardins, as an example, describes Canada as one of the cleanest fiscal dirty shirts among advanced economies, noting that investor demand for Canadian debt remains strong. So I guess there's that. Though, of course, TD has warned that while net debt is low compared to other G7 countries, rising provincial debts, notably in British Columbia and New Brunswick, have left the country with very little wiggle room to respond to future shocks.
This morning, so it's good that we have you here. We've just confirmed that Premier Doug Ford has actually bought a used sort of private jet, a Premier's jet, to get around the province of Ontario. A statement coming from the Premier before I get your response has just come out. He says this, it's a made in Canada Challenger 650. They're spending $28.9 million. It's a pre-owned jet, as he says.
All the while, Air Canada has suspended their flights to JFK Airport due to jet fuel prices, they say, from June 1st until October 25th. You know, don't get me wrong. Obviously, yes, the cost of fuel has changed. If only Canada could do something to displace that. Crazy. Too bad we can't, hey?
Is there a world now in which the terms of the MOU need to be rethought at all? And I'll follow up on one of the questions that the Prime Minister got today, in particular where the Pathways project is concerned. It's basically a $20 billion project conceived of at a time when there was at least some value attached to the idea of lower carbon-intensive barrels of oil. It is difficult to find any evidence right now of any buyer that is hungry for that. It feels like your government is hanging on to something that might hold us back from becoming what you've promised us to become, which is an energy superpower, in order to satisfy perhaps progressives within the party. Is that really in the best interest of the Canadian economy? And do you need to rethink the terms of that MOU?
So I'll quote Premier Smith, when I was with her in Houston, said that it is very important for Alberta and for the industry to future-proof the industry. She talked explicitly about how other major energy superpowers like Saudi Arabia are working on CCUS, are working on ways to decarbonize their barrels. And the Premier said it is important to have a carbon price so that we can help future-proof the industry in Alberta.
Actually, there's some clarification required there because Premier Smith has consistently opposed any sort of federal consumer carbon tax, right? However, she has said that they will support the industrial carbon pricing tier. Why? Because that's the only way that they can get ahead and do literally anything. You must obey or you will be punished. The future-proofing argument, though, had far less to do with we need to have a carbon price, otherwise we're not going to be competitive, and much more to do with the industry needs to know what the hell this number is. Otherwise, they are not going to spend billions of dollars investing in our country when it's all up in the air and they have no idea what that final price tag will be. So yeah, you need certainty.
So you don't think there's a world in which that's holding us back right now from becoming the energy superpower you've promised will become? Because there is a delay that's taking place in reaching this MOU, and part of that surrounds the carbon price and the Pathways project. Like, those are the two outstanding things.
I do not think it's a problem. I think, if anything, the price of oil makes it more important than ever for us to take advantage of this and to reinvest in the industry and future-proof the industry, as the Premier mentioned down in Houston.
So just to be clear, no changes to the terms of the MOU, just further negotiations?
We are working hard. We have a shared vision that was laid out between Premier Smith and the Prime Minister, and we're working to get to that shared vision. So we're on track.
To say that Canada is on track to being an energy superpower is so laughably incorrect. I'm stunned that they confidently say it, because Carney's goal is to use Alberta's energy as a geopolitical tool to displace Russian or high emission oil, right? But the reality is that the International Energy Agency has recently warned that Canada's oil sands production could begin to decline by 2030 if they don't figure this out soon. Not to mention, as Houston admits, Saudi Arabia is aggressively competing in this sector. So if they don't move very quickly, that means that all of that production, all of that money, that capital is going to move to the US or to Saudi Arabia or other places in the Middle East. In fact, Saudi Arabia recently just expanded one of their pipelines so that they were no longer affected by the Strait of Hormuz. They did that in a month. What has Canada done?
I think I saw a headline. Mr. Carney said, "It's time to get serious."
Yeah.
I mean, what has he been doing for the last year?
Right.
Has he not been serious for the last year? I mean, I thought we were in a very serious time all along.
Another fact to this is that, according to Premier Smith, on April 15th, the White House approved the advancement of multiple pipeline projects carrying Alberta oil to the United States. Expanding pipeline capacity to the U.S. is something she's been advocating for with this U.S. administration since their last election, and it has paid off. This is great news for Alberta and Canada. It has the potential to unlock hundreds of billions of dollars in energy investment for our province and country. We hope the federal government moves this fast when it comes to our pipeline project submission in June. This has been Canada's entire model, almost. Fewer choices always result in less competition, always results in higher costs to consumers. And we're going to see that with this as well, among many other sectors. You know, Build Canada, we're going to make sure that we only get Canadian-made stuff. Well, Canadian-made stuff is more expensive, and that's why companies weren't choosing it. So now you're going to increase the cost, which is going to be passed down to consumers. Again, and you know, all of this could be removed if Canada just started being, I don't know, competitive. I know. That is so MAGA of me to say.
All of these people, the Red Tories, for the most part, except for Michael Chong, have been chased out of the Conservative Party, and it's become more of a right-wing party with a lot of MAGA people in it. And that's a challenge for the Conservatives now, because I mean, I can remember when Mr. Poilievre won the leadership, Brian Mulroney went over to Stornoway and he said, you know, look, Pierre, you got to go and fish where the fish are, and the fish aren't all on the right wing; they're in the center, and this is what Mr. Carney has understood, and he's moved the party to the center where more people are comfortable with.
No, he's got a big old Grand Bank trawler running right down the middle of the Canadian spectrum. But, you know, Bob.
This might mean absolutely nothing, but does anybody else think it's kind of weird that David Cochrane is on a leave of absence from the CBC and mysteriously returns the same day that the Liberals secure that majority government through those by-elections that were already held by Liberal voters? I do. I think it's kind of weird, but hey, could just be a coincidence. Nonetheless, Mr. Fife, yep, that's not journalism, analysis, or even political commentary. You're just putting a label on people. And also, just to fill you in, indeed, the Conservative Party of Canada is a conservative party, which means that it's like center to center, right? I would also love for him to expand on what about it is MAGA. That would be really cool. And, you know, for him to say there's a lot of MAGA people in it, that doesn't really seem that beneficial, because if you're a MAGA person in the Canadian Conservative Party, that would mean that you can't vote in elections because you're not a Canadian citizen, because you're a MAGA, which means you're voting Republican in the American election and you support Make America Great Again. So anyway, though, obviously it's the very classic, would expect absolutely nothing less from Mr. Fife and nothing less from a panel of Liberals on CBC News. You take a polarizing foreign label and attach it to a domestic opponent. Note, by the way, how they previously and still continue to do this with conservatives and people who literally just want like a strong economy, and suddenly you're a Nazi, right? You're a fascist, you're MAGA. None of it's true, literally ever, but it is a polarizing foreign label because once you say it, you don't need to explain anything else. It instantly implies extremism, unelectability, chaos. That's it. That's all that it is. And the thing about it that's really unfortunate is by doing that, which is exactly why they do it, you fail to have any reasonable or rational conversation. And that's how this country has been run for how long? And can we just take a look as well? So what exactly is he referring to? Nobody has specified that. You just throw out the label. I've successfully put this in the heads of people again. But what policies does Mr. Poilievre have that are far right or make America great again? Which ones? Can you point them out to me? Because when Mark Carney takes Pierre Poilievre's policies, we are told that Mark Carney is pragmatic and he's a good, strong leader. These same pundits frequently tell us that there's no differentiation between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre as the Conservatives, while simultaneously telling us you're MAGA for reading and talking about information provided from Statistics Canada, as an example. And I see right through all of you who are on this panel who benefit financially thanks to your consulting firms, or in Robert Fife's case, the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. P.S. The Globe and Mail in 2025 received over $2 million from the Online News Act payments. They also, in 2019, received a 2-year, $2.3 million contract for media monitoring following a previous $1.4 million contract. Your own government has become your comfort. So they're safe, and you've trained yourself into carrying the water for them, because without that comfort, you would be so screwed. And I really mean it when I say that I feel sorry for these people, because there is no way that that is a happy life that you're living when you have a government body that controls your lifestyle to that degree, because you have to comply. Otherwise, you're cut off. And in that time frame, Robert Fife is an example. He's been working for the Globe for 11 years. You have become so dependent on that government. You have had to repeat the talking points so frequently that even a simple Google search will tell you that it's not quite accurate, that it's not the whole picture, that there's missing details, that the takeaway is in fact quite different than what you are regurgitating. But you've trained yourself into believing it to be true, because if it's not true, you don't have money anymore. You don't have a job anymore. So does that mean the Liberals are far right, MAGA too? Y'all just added Marilyn Gladue into your party, who's arguably much more conservative than Mr. Poilievre is. And not to mention caught in potential criminal bribery over her floor crossing, because she admitted that the reason why she did it is because it was, and I quote, harder to get funding when not on the government benches. She observed that after she crossed the floor, the call from the minister's office arrived immediately. Federal funding for infrastructure, housing, and local projects, and all of those things that would benefit her riding and her politically. That's illegal. I always feel myself wanting to defend against this type of absurdity because it's so inaccurate. But at the end of the day, your ego is always going to make you want to explain yourself. However, people like this want you to explain yourself so that they can take your words and twist them to use against you. And to that, I say, I know where you're getting paid from. I know why you're doing this. And I know that it's not grounded in truth or reality.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing is the classical divide between, the liberal elites of our country who are impressed by having an Oxford or a Harvard education, and the rest of the country that's trying to pay the bills. And I think ultimately, if the Liberals want to talk about Mark Carney's education in a foreign university, be my guest, like have at it, because what Pierre Poilievre has got to do is talk about the real issues that are concerning people, like paying for groceries at the end of the week. So this is a problem that isn't a problem for the Conservative Party, that's for sure.
But Tony,
last word to you,
Pierre
Chris.
Pierre Poilievre started talking about his education. The Liberals didn't talk about his education. Pierre Poilievre started doing that.
You know, these people think that they're so smart, yet they only act impulsively on emotion. They will never argue you on what it was that was actually said and it being untrue, because Pierre Poilievre didn't say anything that was factually incorrect. They're mad about how it made them feel that he questioned our supreme leader, Mark Carney's education. Oh, blasphemy. Yeah, Mark Carney has some degrees in economics and philosophy, so great. He can destroy the economy and then give me a lecture about how he's a good person for doing it. Like, reality is reality, and until you want to start debating about it, what you have to say just, it's not impressive. It's meaningless. It means absolutely nothing. I'm not offended by it. I'm not insulted by it. I feel very sorry for you. Because what we should be talking about as a nation is reality, our economy. What are we actually doing to improve the situation? Not, how dare he talk about his economic background like that? Nobody cares. Nobody living in real life cares. In the same way that nobody cares about the Davos speech. But again, these people will always redirect the focus somewhere else that is completely irrelevant. Gosh, it is just so meaningless because they can't talk about what's relevant because they're wrong about that. So let them plot, let them scheme, let them twist and manipulate. Let's see who wins on the other side. And hopefully they're just as confident in the truth as I am. I'm Jasmine Lane. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, feel free to watch the interview I did with Pete Hoekstra, which was posted just yesterday. It's a good one. We got through a lot of topics and there was a lot of insight to it. So I'd love to know what you think about it. Let me know in the comments down below. As always, like, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you very soon.